Hello everyone, this is Joanne and a very welcome to you. If you celebrate Christmas, I hope you had a wonderful Christmas time with your family and ready for the new year. Today's episode is a quilting episode and I would love to share this scrappy improvised style quilt that features soft curves or gentle curves. Now, if you've never worked with curvy style quilt block, don't be afraid. It's not as difficult, especially with this project. We will do soft curve or gentle curve, so it's not too defined and the technique is not as complicated. Obviously, this is a great scrap busting project, so pull out your favorite scraps. Doesn't matter what color, the brighter and the bolder the color is, the better. So feel free to use your imagination and have fun with the entire project. Finished measurement of this quilt is 57.5 inch by 57.5 inch. So yes, I made this quilt to be square. Now, since we're going to work with consistent size block, which is the 10-inch square blocks, you can easily modify this quilt. So you can change the size, you can change the layout, and really you can make it smaller or bigger, make it rectangle, add sashing, border. So there are many possibilities. So enough of me rambling, and without further ado, let's get started. So what you're gonna do first is to cut your scraps into various size strips. So the width of your strips should be between 1 and 3 inches, and the length should be at least 11 inches. Since we're gonna make 10-inch square blocks, this way we'll have enough room to wiggle and to trim off the block to the exact size. I divided my strips into 3 categories. So I've got the light or neutral ones, and then I've got the medium ones, and I've got the dark or very bold colors. Now you want to take 2 strips that are contrasting in color. So I've got here an orange strip and a white strip. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to take my rotary cutter and then make a gentle curve cut. So I'm simply going to eyeball this. Don't think too much when you do this. Simply just wiggle your hand a little bit and make the curve. Alright, so you can see the curve that I made. I think it's a little bit too curvy, but it's okay. Now I'm going to take my orange strip and then lay them right side together. So you want to have the straight edge strip to be on top and the curved strip to be at the bottom. And I'm going to go to my sewing machine and stitch them in place. Now when you sew, simply maneuver the top strip, making sure that the edges are aligned. And you may sometimes have to stop and reposition your strips, so that's perfectly fine. Your aim is to make sure that the edges are aligned. And of course you want to sew with 1/4 inch of seam allowance, and if you have 1/4 inch foot, I recommend for you to use that. And when you're done, go ahead and press towards one side. Alright, you can see now the curved shape taken place there. Next, I'm gonna go ahead and make another cut. This time I'm going to cut the orange strip. Now if you've got a decent amount of fabric from the cut, at least like 1 inch wide, you can keep that and use it for later. Now I'm gonna take another strip with straight edge, and then I'm going to sew this to the orange fabric. So I'm gonna go ahead and lay that right side together, and then sew pretty much the same way like before. So I'm going to maneuver my upper strip to follow the curve of the lower fabric, and then press towards one side. So you want to go ahead and repeat the same sequence and build your block until your fabric is measuring a little over than 10 inch by 10 inch, since this project called for 10-inch square block. However, you can obviously do different size block. You can do larger block or smaller block. It's totally up to you. Alright, so here I've got my fabric already measuring a little bit over than 10 inch by 10 inch. Now I'm gonna go ahead and take my ruler and then square this fabric to measure exactly 10 inch by 10 inch. So here I've got my square ruler. So I'm going to lay that out on top of the fabric, and this is the 10-inch point. So I'm going to trim off whatever excess from either sides. Now, if you've got a decent size strip of fabric from trimming your block, like at least an inch wide, you can keep this and incorporate this with another blocks later. Just make sure that you trim off your fabric to the measurement of exactly 10-inch square or whatever desired measurement that you want. Alright, so here I've got my block already trimmed to size, and here I've got several more that I have made. So feel free to be as playful as you want. Use up your scraps. You can incorporate as many colors as you wanted to. So yeah, just have fun with your project. If you've got a decent size strip from trimming off your block, the one that I showed you earlier, at least 1 inch wide and 11 inches long, you can also incorporate this to your quilt block. So do pretty much the same way as before. Make a curve cut and then take another strip and sew them together. Now I'm going to sew another strip to the other side of my scrappy strip because I don't want this to be positioned at the edge of my block. So here I've got my fabric already measuring a little over than 10-inch wide. Now I'm gonna go ahead and square this one up. Alright, so here I've got my quilt block ready to go. You see how the scrappy strip really add an interesting accent to the block. So here I've got a couple more that I have made. So I went ahead and made 36 blocks for my quilt, and I laid them out in one direction, which is vertical direction. So I arranged them in 6 rows, and each row has 6 blocks. You may also arrange your block in different layout. For example, this one here is almost like a rail fence, or you can alternate horizontal layout and then vertical layout, just like shown in this picture. Or you can also group some blocks together and then add sashing and then add another group of blocks. Now I'm gonna go ahead and start piecing these quilt blocks one row at a time. Of course, I'm gonna start from the very first row. So I'm gonna take all of this. Now I'm gonna go ahead and sew them together with 1/4 inch of seam allowance. And of course, I press the seams of each row towards the opposite direction. So I've already sewn all the blocks from each rows together. Now I'm gonna go ahead and sew each rows together. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna start by sewing the first and the second row together, and then I will go ahead and sew the third and the fourth row, and then the fifth and the sixth rows, and then sew them all together. So I'm going to nestle the seams of each block and then pin them in place. This way everything will nicely align. And then sew with 1/4 inch of seam allowance. And then press the seams towards one side. Alright guys, so here I've got my quilt top ready to go. Now I'm gonna go ahead and layer this with the quilt batting and the quilt backing as well. And I'm gonna baste them with the spray basting. You can do pin basting, or you can combine pin basting with spray basting. Do what more comfortable for you. Now go ahead and do the quilting. You can do free motion quilting like what I do here, or you can also use your walking foot and run wavy lines. I think that would work great for this quilt as well. Or you can also do hand quilting. Just have fun and enjoy the entire quilting process. Now that I've done quilting, I'm gonna go ahead and trim off my excess batting and backing. This is a great opportunity to again square up your quilt and straighten up any wonky edges. The last step will be to bind your quilt. So I'm going to use this fabric in navy blue. This is the Kona cotton fabric. And I'm going to cut 2.5 inch binding. And for this project, I will need 7 strips. Now go ahead and bind your quilt with your favorite binding method. And that's all I have for you today, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I hope this video served you well, and I shall see you next time with another fun sewing and quilting project. Goodbye.